And now I'd like to invite Denise Firth to share her story. Denise?
Look, thank you very much, Anne-Marie, and thank you very much, Catherine. You've given lots and lots of insight, and I think I'll probably be repeating a lot of it here. Well, as had already been said, I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 1988, and after a mastectomy, I required no further treatment. And out of the blue in 2004, I was diagnosed with stage 3 serous ovarian cancer. After a radical hysterectomy and 1 round of chemotherapy, I thought I was cured. But then, now 12 and a half years later, 1 regime of radiotherapy and 3 more of chemotherapy, I'm living with advanced ovarian cancer, which is a nasty, insidious disease. But I'm very privileged at the moment to actually be on a targeted therapy on a Leper, and I'm actually going to strength to strength. Obviously, on this 12-and-a-half-year journey, I've learnt a lot. From the outset, I've had a brilliant gyno surgeon, Tom Jobling, and on our very first meeting, he told my husband and I, if you were my wife, this is the treatment that I would be suggesting. This is the operation that I would be suggesting. And that really has more or less formed the basis of the philosophy of the treatment team that I have. Tom sent me to his colleague and also a friend, Gary Richardson, who had the same values. Basically, they treat their patients as if they were loved family members. I feel truly blessed to have them on my side because they're compassionate, expert, and very caring. They see me as an individual as well as a wife and a mother, and they care for my whole family, and all decisions that are made in my best interests. I feel that my specialist team has really created a nice little nurturing nest where I feel protected and in excellent hands. During my journey, I've had thousands of blood tests, procedures, MRIs, PET scans, CAT scans, operations, blood transfusions. My veins collapsed, surprise, surprise, with that much chemotherapy. A portacath had to be introduced. And then, lo and behold, I became allergic to 2 of the chemo drugs. But I've always tried to stay positive, and I've always had complete faith in my specialist team. When I was first told that I had chemotherapy I had to have chemotherapy after my hysterectomy, I was devastated. I'd seen the ravages of cancer and chemo in my family with my sister, my mother, and my grandmother and a maternal aunt. I was determined I wasn't going to be counted in their number. Unfortunately, they all died. So I asked a million questions. What drugs would be going to be used? What the time regimes, length, side effects, what to do, what not to do, etc. All of my questions were very patiently and thoroughly answered. And if I was unsure about anything, I'd sort of say, well, what do you mean by that? Or are you actually saying, so that I had clarification? It had to be very clear in my head because I was making huge decisions. I also, from day one, have carried little notebooks, and here they are. Every single question that I have ever wanted to ask any of my oncology team are written in those books. The date, the time of my appointment, and that particular question. Then, on the appointment date, guess what? Comes out, asks the question, and I write a response beside it. Basically, that's so I've got a record, I know what the issues have been, and also when I'm driving home with my husband, I don't say, hey, Greg, what did Gary actually say about that? We've got the information there in black and white. I've never, ever had a question that has been even seen to be irrelevant or a waste of time. They've always been answered honestly, and rarely do I ever need clarification, simply because my oncology team and my oncologist, Gary, don't do doctor speak. They speak to me in terminology that I can understand. Often, as Catherine suggested, that I've actually asked for printed results, so for blood tests or scans or whatever else. So I've got those printed results. I actually keep a record, and it's in my Gary file, and it's my right, it's your right, and basically don't accept a refusal. If you feel that your specialist team aren't treating you with respect that you require or deserve, then, or that you're feeling a little overlooked or overwhelmed, you know your body, you've got the right, and if this team isn't to your liking, then find a new one. Get a second opinion. For us, it's a matter of life and death. You have to be proactive, and you've got so much to gain and so very, very, very much to lose. But having said that, I've always been 101% confident and content with the team, and I consider myself very blessed that they're on my side. If there is anything that you're worried about or concerned about, then ask. Remember, no question is so trivial if it's any way caused you a sleepless night or any worry. You can be almost 100% sure that if you've got a question, somebody else that oncologist or that nurse or that doctor has seen has also been asked that question. They'll have a response. Remember, worry will not cure anything. And as somebody told me, worry is like a rocking chair. It gets you nowhere. Also, please don't blindly use Dr. Google as your go-to resource. If you've got to look up symptoms, tests, information, then please, please, please use reliable resources. Ovarian Cancer Australia, BRECAN, Cancer Council, and the whole range of ones that Catherine put up there, all list reliable sites. Likewise, each of these groups have brilliant printed as well as online resources, telephone counselling and information sessions that are open to all. So use it. On that, I highly recommend the Resilience Kit from Ovarian Cancer Australian. Okay, use these organisations. They're fonts of knowledge, and knowledge is power. To make any decision, you need accurate and up-to-date information. Empower yourself. It will help you to cope, because trust me, there's nothing worse than that not knowing. That's what causes you worry. So ask. Also, your oncologist, your hospital, your oncology departments all have written materials about operations, procedures, etc. Take the material, read it. If you don't understand it, highlight it. When you go back for your next appointment, take it with you and ask. Ask for clarification. Ask what it means. No matter how vague, also, side effects, they often seem to be very, very trivial, and you think, oh, okay, write them down, because trust me, if you put the frequency, the severity, and the date beside each of your side effects, what you're going to be doing is, again, you're going to have a record. At your next appointment, ask about them. Your specialist team needs to know what's happening in your body. They have got no other way of knowing by you being honest and upfront. And therefore, you're in control. For instance, I once developed these really weird welts on my abdomen and bruises on my arm. I didn't think anything of it. I thought I'd probably been out gardening and rubbed against something. But put it in my trusty little book, and guess what? When I spoke to Gary, the next appointment, Gary, what do you think this is? He looked at it and he said, well, Denise, he said, you're actually allergic to gemcitabine. If I had gone through that day to have day oncology, to have yet again more gemcitabine, I would have been in dire straits. So, even though it seemed insignificant, in actual fact, probably in some ways it saved my life. Also, your specialists should have a registrar. If for some reason you desperately need to speak to your oncologist and can't get through, ask to speak to the registrar. They work with your specialist. They have got access to your medical records, and they are an excellent source of knowledge. If they're unsure, they'll get to the bottom of your problem and return your call. Likewise, as Catherine was saying here, if you're any apprehensive about your appointments, and I must admit, even after 12 and a half years, I tend to get a little bit anxious when I go and see Gary, even though he's an absolute delight, because I think, will I remember things, etc., etc. Take a family member with you, or a really trusted friend, someone who'll support you. You'll gain confidence with someone by your side, all right? Having said that, I have never been to any of my oncology operations, any of my appointments without either my husband or my daughter by my side. And I consider myself very, very privileged to have that happen. Also, we as a family, and I've only got a little family, my husband and my daughter, Greg and Sky, they make decisions with me. They come to my specialist appointments, they ask questions, and all of their questions have always been honestly, compassionately, and answered with reasoned responses. Likewise, when it came to genetic testing, we were at a BRECAN session, my daughter and I, and Claire Scott was speaking, and she convinced Sky in that session that genetic testing was the way to go, as there was a very strong connection between breast and ovarian cancer, and there was a very strong presence of it in our family. And that Claire said she thought it would be valuable. So Sky and I had the discussion, and along with Greg, we decided, yep, this was a good thing to do. So in June 2014, surprise, surprise, I was tested positive to BRCA1, but to my great, great joy to this very day, and my great relief, Sky tested negative. It was a very hard conversation for us to have, but it had been a vital one for her and her future. Likewise, when I was first diagnosed in 2014, my husband, who is an absolute delight, took on the task, unbidden by me, of informing our family and friends that I actually did have ovarian cancer. As you can imagine, there were many tearful telephone calls both into and out of the house. He was from that time on my filter. He'd answer the phone and by gesture or charade inform me as to who the caller was. Then by my facial expressions he would know whether or not I even wanted to speak to them. He was my protector, my shield, and from those days, even from those days when I couldn't even face getting out of bed, let alone going through the saga of well-meaning questions and chatter. I've always tried to be very honest with my friends. I've always tried to tell them the truth, and I'd sort of say, I just couldn't speak to you yesterday, but I'd ring them the next day and say, chat. I've not needed to be brave, and I've never made excuses. If I was feeling fragile or exhausted or confused, then I'd say so. And just because I'd made arrangements to do something, and I sort of felt, it's the last thing I feel like doing today, I'd maybe change or modify the situation or the activity, or just cancel it and say, let's do it another day when I'm feeling a little more chipper. If they're good friends, they'll understand. If they're not good friends, if they don't understand, then maybe they're not such good friends after all. Everyone always wants to help, always wants to do something. Sometimes all you really want to do is just be left alone, but get them to do things that you know you're going to have to do anyway. Maybe it's picking up the kids from school, maybe taking you shopping, maybe making you a cake, I don't know, doing your ironing. Get them to do something that you really hate, I suppose. They'll feel really involved, and you've got a task that's completed. As I said, we have a very small family, and there were very few children when I was initially diagnosed, so discussing my cancer wasn't a real issue with them. Their parents chose, again with my blessing, to tell them that I'd had an operation, that I was going to have medicine to take, and that medicine may make my hair fall out, but that it would grow back. All these questions were honestly answered, and the children were given enough information sort of to satisfy their curious minds. So I really didn't have any huge input into that. This was what my family and my friends did with respect to their children, and it worked well. I was still at school as a teacher when I was initially diagnosed, and my principal, who was also a very personal friend, took on the role of telling the staff that I was on extended sick leave and required surgery. Those who were closer to me at school knew that I had ovarian cancer, and that they were very supportive and caring, and organising for my return. The students were informed again that I was on sick leave and that a replacement teacher would be found. The juniors, that probably didn't matter too much, but particularly for my Year 12s, there was much sort of concern because it was later in the year when I actually had my first recurrence, but years later in the year, but years later when I had my first recurrence. So my Year 12s were very, very concerned about me. But we have a school counsellor and a welfare counsellor, and she dealt with the situation along with me very well indeed. We've all got fears, and there are a million myths and stories about cancer. Everyone, no matter who and how well-meaning they are, has a story to tell, whether it be horrific about someone who died this dastardly death or feel good. They've all got advice to give us as to how we should or could deal with our cancer, what will cure our cancer, whether it be exercise or food or various remedies. I deal with this, and probably not as kindly as Catherine would, but I deal with this by saying, thanks, that's great, I'll look into that. But basically, I ignore any advice, irrespective of how well-meaning it happens to be. Okay, but I do love Catherine's idea of her friends saying, I only listen to stories with happy endings. I think that's going to be part of my repertoire now. Mm-hmm. We're on a journey. You, your family, and all your close friends, all of you are affected by cancer in a different way. You have a specialist team who are guides, who are leading you through this journey, but you still make the decisions, okay? The more information you have, the easier it is to make informed choices. Cancer doesn't change who you are, but it gives you a new normal life. Live your life to the full. I've never spent much time worrying or feeling sorry for myself, and I really try the whole time to be very positive and upbeat, making the most of every moment. I never waste time, and I have always made the most of the here and now. I exercise regularly, and I'd love to say I eat a really healthy diet, which I probably do, but gee, I also eat the naughty things and drink the naughty things as well. So, look, basically I eat and drink whatever I desire. I look forward to tomorrow, and I suppose really I feel so very, very grateful that I'm living in a time where medical science and research is discovering truly wonderful new treatments and hopefully diagnostic tests and even cures. You know, I saw the ravages that my family have gone through, and I thought, oh, if only my mother and my sister and my aunt and my grandmother had lived now, you know, they'd be here by my side, which would be wonderful. In closing, I must say that I'm truly blessed by having a wonderful husband and daughter who've been with me for every step of this journey. I doubt that I would be here now without their unstinting love and support. I honestly believe that it has been much, much harder for Sky and Greg to go through this journey with me than it has been for me. I love them both dearly, and I would be absolutely lost without them. So thank you all for listening. I hope that I've given you some helpful hints and that maybe your journey might be a little less stressful and a little easier. So thank you, and now back to Anne-Marie.
Denise, thank you so very much. That was fantastic. That was just inspiring. That was very moving.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question or two that's popped up. Somebody's asked what kind of medication you said you were on. Did you say it was a Leper?
Yes, a Leper, which is basically a PARP inhibitor, and it's a very, very clever little drug. And what it does, it only kills the DNA in the cancer cells. So I've been on it now for about 20 months, and I've never felt better. It's absolutely brilliant, and hopefully, fingers, legs, everything else crossed, it will be on the PBS very soon, and therefore everybody who's in my situation will be able to have it prescribed, because at the moment I'm getting it compassionately from AstraZeneca, but at the moment your oncologist can prescribe it for you, but it is it's very expensive, and it shouldn't be. We should all, look, I feel incredibly privileged that I'm on it, but every woman should have the right to be on this drug, because literally it is a lifesaver.
So, Denise, can I ask how did you find out about the Leper?
Basically, I went to one of my normal appointments with Gary, and if any of you happen to know Gary Richardson, he handed me this paper. He said, "Sign it, Denise, I'm importing drugs for you." And I went, "Oh, okay." So I signed away, and after I'd signed away, he explained about what a Leper was, how it was going to work. I had previously heard about it through David Battle and also Claire Scott, through various BRCAN and Ovarian Cancer Australian sessions. So I knew what a target therapy was. I had heard this name bandied around, and when Gary said, it will work, I had to tick lots of boxes. I had to have a BRCA1. I had to know that my cancer was going to be controlled in some way by platinum, as in carboplatinum, and I had to have sort of what they call sort of advanced ovarian cancer or recurrent. So once I ticked those boxes, Gary said, "Okay, this is it." And as I said, I've been on it now for must be almost about 20 months, and it's been brilliant. So ask your oncologist about it.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thanks, Denise. Catherine, there's a question here for you. The question asks, you mentioned assertiveness. And if it doesn't come naturally, do you have any more specific tips on asserting yourself with doctors, friends, etc.?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point. I mean, it's very easy for me to sit here and say, be assertive, but we're all different, and we all come to this with different levels of comfort around this, and obviously really hard to learn new skills and new habits at probably one of the most stressful times of our lives. So I really acknowledge that comment. So when we're thinking about assertiveness, maybe start by thinking about what's your message, what do you want to get across, so be very clear about this. Think about using I statements and I would like rather than you, the sort of statements that start with you. So think about a very clear message starting with I. Then maybe with family or people around us, we can actually, we could write it down and we can actually rehearse saying it. And this might be just like we might practice going for a job interview. We might sort of practice actually vocalising it and saying it. And just give it a go. It might be helpful, as you said before, to have a support person with you. It might be that your support person is someone that is able to actually ask the question for you. But afterwards, review what went well, what didn't go so well, what could you try next time. And I think really giving yourself a pat on the back, acknowledging what worked, is really helpful as far as building your confidence to be more assertive next time. So all the communication we're talking about, they're skills, they can be learned, but it takes practice, and sometimes it does take going out of our comfort zone. Again, if we just did a quick little search on the internet, how to be assertive, there's some, quite, again, being cautious, but there can be little tips just as far as how we might wish to communicate. Run it past someone in your life that you feel gets that balance right between not being too pushy or aggressive or being too passive. So get some support.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Now, do we have any further questions from participants to either Denise or to Catherine? Well, thank you for attending today. Just as a little reminder that the webinar recording will be available next week on the Ovarian Cancer Australia website to view on demand. So indeed will the slides from Catherine's presentation today. I'd like to give a really big thank you to everybody for attending today's webinar, and I'd like to thank Catherine and Denise. It was very informative and inspiring presentations you both gave. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the time that you put in. We value the effort that you've given today. If everyone could stay on the webinar platform for just a few more minutes, and we'll direct you to our online survey. And a final shout out for OCA, who have launched a new and improved online community forum. OCA Connect is a place where you can join with other women with a cancer diagnosis or an ovarian cancer diagnosis, to have conversations, seek support, advice and information. And you can go to our website and follow the links. Once again, thank you, Denise, and thank you very much to Catherine. And we'll see you at the next webinar.
Thanks.